the thing with, a lot of Holocaust stories where they sort of sell, like you could just skip ahead to what the bad thing and then it's over. I wanted to show what was really true in Italy, and I think was unique to Italy, that the fascists, through these laws, kind of was death by 1,000 cuts. I wanted to show the little things, like, as you say, rabbis only going, we should hide this, we should do this. And then what the Italians do, the fascists do, then what the Nazis do. And boom, boom, boom. And it becomes a ratcheting up of really legalized horror. The question is, what happens when the laws themselves are unjust? The answer is eternal.
Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where today's guest is Lisa Scottoline, and we are going to be talking about her first work of historical fiction, Eternal, which has been so well received. It's a New York Times and USA Today and Indie bestseller, as well as a Library Reads pick, and yes, a Book Reporter Bets On selection. I read this book last July in manuscript, and I went and actually found this for you today. This is the manuscript of the finished book, okay? And I had pages that I folded down that you can see here of things that I want to talk to Lisa about, and I've been waiting all this time to do that.
It shows that you are a true publishing insider, because nobody gets that thing except for a few people.
And who holds on to it all this time but me, okay? So I am thoroughly looking forward to talking to Lisa today. I've been looking forward to this conversation, especially since this book is just so super special. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So the idea to write this book is something that is grounded back in your days of being an English major, which I did not realize you were, at the University of Pennsylvania. So tell us about that, because I love that the book has got very deep roots on many levels.
It really does. I mean, it's embarrassing, but 40 years ago, I was an English major at Penn, and I took a course from Philip Roth. It was I still can't even believe that I got that opportunity. This is from a family where not everybody went to college. Like my dad was the first. So of course, I took that course. It was 15 kids. You had to get into it. It was a year-long seminar. And I actually have a visual aid because I was so in awe of him, because we'll talk more about that, but I was a yearbook photographer. And so I said, we should really have a picture of Philip Roth in the yearbook. And so here's a picture I took of him back then. This is in the 70s, people weren't even born yet, but I was. And it was just such an amazing experience. And I won't bore you, but it was take a novel every week. Part of it was literature of the Holocaust. And he actually he always said, I'm examining people in extreme circumstances. Well, when you think about it, that's a really terrific grounding for a thriller writer, for Eternal, for lots of things, because it's essentially drama. And the Holocaust being the most heart-wrenching true life. And so he would take the novel or the memoir, like Primo Levi's If This Is a Man, which was life in Auschwitz. So survival in Auschwitz, right? And break it down and say, why is this paragraph here? And then why is this sentence here? And then really, really micro, really, really granular. Why this word? Why this verb? And he never was like, you should do this. And also, interestingly, he never used his own experience. Like he never said, when I wrote X. He was very, like the way he sat, you could see he sat and lectured. We wanted us to call him Mr. Roth. It was a very formal class, but I just drunk it in. I mean, and when he introduced us to Primo Levi, and I was like, why did I not know? I'm Italian-American. I sort of thought I knew a lot about the Holocaust and about Italy's history. So when I started to learn more and more about what happened in Rome, this horrible true life event that basically I didn't even know about. I'd been to Rome and I've, had the artichokes, and I thought, this is really hallowed ground. This is really a story that needs to be told. But frankly, I didn't know if I had the chops to tell it. I wanted to be a writer. I write 30 novels. Finally, I'm like, you know what? You're practicing. All of these themes are going to come together in this novel. You need to start to do it. And it's the one you held in your hands. It's Eternal. Yeah. I just couldn't be more happy or more lucky or more grateful to a teacher like Philip Roth. All my teachers, who knew that they would have an influence 40 years later? This is a life-changing book for me.
I was thinking that the class was small. The process of discussing the book was so intense and more intimate.
Right.
I really think that drove your interest as well, because it's not like you were in a lecture hall. It's not like you were very involved with the book. And I remember taking small classes like this when I was at Fordham. I took like Books That Changed America. There were 15 people in the class. This is why I like the class. Okay.
Right.
You had to read a book every week, write a paper on it, and go to class once a week.
Exactly.
Right up my alley. Because I didn't really want to sit in class, but when I went, I wanted it to be intense. And I feel like it's something that I wish was talked about more in universities or even a high school setting, because I think these seminal experiences are the ones that really matter. But there's so much we're trying to jam into everybody's heads, but these are the things you're going to walk away from. And 40 years later say, this is what I want to write about.
And honestly, you're absolutely on the nose, because I didn't really even put it together. Even throughout a professional life of writing, I was writing 2 novels a year for the past 10 years and memoir, and trying to understand, you try to be a better writer. I am really trying to improve the craft all the time. I want readers to be excited and feel like they got their money's worth. I always think, because I was so broke for so long, did you get your money's worth? Give them their money, make them. And this one, I think I really feel kind of proud that we did that in spades. So much is in it. This true life story, and this really life in everyday Rome, and how all of these things, this interplay of law and justice and love and hate, and all of it, like big themes, a bigger canvas. So it's very energizing. I'm so jazzed and crazy. I'm caffeinated all the time now.
I'm caffeinated in my
down. I'm like, I can't calm down. I can't.
Now, did you ever talk to Roth through the years, like after you became a published writer? Were you ever in touch again after that class?
No,
or no?
I mean, he was not in touch with any of us. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have no idea, but he didn't have office hours. I feel like I understand that a little, because he protected himself. I'm sure everybody in that class wanted to write, but we never talked about it. And he never said, here's how you write a novel. He said, here's how Primo Levi wrote a novel. And he was a master, and more people should read and know about this subject. So it was very indirect. He was really a great, brilliant, very cool guy. And I feel like I got to know him in the way that readers know people, authors, through their literature, and people in a book group know each other by opening their hearts up when they talk about a book. It was really very pure and intellectual, but also emotional. So there was a real strong connection, but there was never a personal connection in any way.
Never like, oh, you were published, just saw your book. Nothing like that was ended up happening.
Nope. I remember we were invited to we had a party. Somebody had a party in the class, and we all went to it. Like, who's not going to go to a party? I was like sitting right next to him, and a cat came by, and I said, I like cats. He said, I do too. That was some conversation. I was like, what do you say to Philip Roth? Like, I like cats. I like cats. I have 2 cats. I want to tell you.
Let's have that deep conversation. You like
really? I know. He was like, God, get away from me.
And then you're almost intimidated in the room to have a conversation. And there are a lot of very famous people who said no one talks to them. And they said because people are intimidated to say anything to them.
That's completely nothing. I was in the class for the year. How many weeks in a year? Every week. Couldn't say anything about cats. Great.
Yeah. Exactly. Really good. Well, at the heart of the story are 3 friends, and everything plays through their eyes. What drew you to say there was going to be this troika, that there's these 3 people? It could have been 2. It could have been 1. Why the 2?
Right. Well, I really, there's a part of me that, well, first of all, as a technical matter, you have to make the reader feel the loss that comes later and the changes. So you have to show the changes. This novel takes place over 20 years, which, unlike my usual books that are like over 15 minutes, it's like, So then when I think about Italy and the times I've been there, and all of the Italian stuff I've read, and all of the movies I watch, and the period fiction, the period movies, I wanted the readers to be transported to all of that Italianità, the food, the colors of Rome, the golds, that patina on the palimpsest of the architecture. It's such an amazing place. and it gives you so much as a setting. So it's a romantic setting in the Byronic sense of the word. Like there's a reason Keats is there and Yeats is there, and they're all making this pilgrimage because Rome sweeps you away. And so I wanted that. So we take some time with the food and the literature of the time and the smells and the oleander and all of that atmosphere. I wanted it to feel drenched in a Roman sunshine. That's how crazy I was. And it took a lot of drafts to get there, but I poured everything I knew, every detail, everything I learned into it. And then in the edit took it away.
And then could pull back out from there.
Exactly.
You're talking this story through these young people. You've got a love triangle, ordinary lives, that it reinforced that these are ordinary people. These are everyday people.
Right.
It's not like we're seeing the history first. We're seeing them. And I think that was so important because we fall in love with these characters who are sort of, if you're a high school kid or you're a college kid and you're reading this book, you could see yourself on these pages. Like if you were reading this, you'd say, oh, I get this. That's what's going on with them. Yeah, it's a little more old fashioned than my life, but you know what? Same thing.
You have to make it real. You have to make it real. You know, I have to go take you to when Elizabeth gets her first bra. And I thought about when I got my first bra. And also their parents are very active in this novel. What I really love, I kind of turned out, I don't really take credit for this. I think it's the gods or maybe one who kind of like in the beginning, you're involved with the younger people, and then the story opens out because you need context, as everyone has a context. And I do that in the thrillers too. You're going to know about Mary D'Annunzio's parents, and you're going to know Mary D'Annunzio better. And in this novel, I really wanted to get the love, because there's a lot of love in this book, and love in its many forms. So of course there's a romantic love that Elizabeth can't decide between. It's kind of Marco, who's kind of hunky and sort of sexy, but also has a secret. And Sandro, who's much more of a listening ear, but a really solid guy and so attractive. So there's romantic love, but there's also the love that they have as friends earlier on. And then there's the love between the two men. These guys just love each other. These families love each other. Marco's and Sandro's family are good friends. And so because I wanted a love triangle that essentially was a little bit no-win. Because Elizabeth realizes early on, as they all sort of do, and I must say I didn't really plan it, but it sort of happened organically, thank God, that, Elizabeth goes, if I choose Sandro, I'm going to lose Marco. And Marco's go, if I win over Sandro, I hurt my best friend. And all of these problems are the everyday problems of every kind of person. And their families have problems that also interact as history, at what we know as history, impinges. Isn't that our life now? I mean, we don't know, there's going to be a pandemic and we're going to have to start wearing masks. We back into it. It dawns on us slowly. There's controversy. Not all the medical experts agree. Not all the politicians agree. Everybody's humana. And we're just trying to survive. And sadly, we lose people. You don't know it until you're in it. You can look back and go, that's what that was. But to process it in real time is what these characters have to do. And that is not easy, but they do it.
And it's also letting their parents down. You're not the bicyclist. You're not the this, you're not the that, who you are and what you are. Everybody's not going to be perfect. Everybody's not going to be in this book. And we see that right from the beginning. I
appreciate you pointing that out. And also the question is about identity all through. Sandro's father, because there's a unique issue of that as fascism came on, it was not anti-Semitic. So Jews in Rome joined the fascist party in the same proportion as non-Jews. So that you have Jewish fascists. And so when the fascism comes on and the anti-Semitic laws start to strip Jews of their profession, their livelihood, even their fascist membership, Sandro's father says to himself, who am I if I'm not a fascist? And then they take their citizenship. Who am I if I'm not Italian? What is my identity is a question you have when you're 18, and you can have at 50, and you could have at 65. And I think the book shows you that in a non-didactic way, in just a very natural way.
Yeah, and
I didn't plan it, it happened.
Yeah, you see people on so many different levels. And I think that the voice here was key. You read books about a time period, and we write so differently today. And was it really a challenge for you to get the voice right of these times? Because it's not the Elizabethan, like Shakespeare kind of writing, but there are words they use that we don't use today. And there's slang we use now that they would never use.
No, it's really true. And I appreciate you pointing that out, because I tried hard to get that right.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really matters because to me, you're setting a mood. Like I had the book back there, but I was such a little control freak. I'm like, I want the cover to feel soft like paper, not like plastic. I want the font inside to be a little bit older fashioned. All of that, and I'm a voicey writer. If I'm known for anything, it's character and voice. So, and my voice, contemporary voice is a lot how I talk, and the characters are all different, of course, but I use contractions. So I'm looking at this, and when I started to read the period fiction, go, you can't do this. This will be false. And actually, I've read some historical fiction. Like that sounds a little, just like you can't have a Corvette drive through. The language can't be anachronistic either. So the trick was having the language be realistic to the time, but also readable to the present. I think I succeeded in doing that. I studied. I noticed the idioms. I had a little head start too, because I'm lucky enough to be published in Italy in the thrillers. And I knew I had come to know my translator because she was this kind of person who would write like, you know, you had like, for example, you had a phrase in a book, she looked like a smacked ass. What does that mean? Right? It's a kind of rude expression, but then I looked it up. It turns out it's actually a very Philly expression. It's idiomatic. So I tried to look for the idioms of the time. For example, they didn't say gossip so much in the fiction. They said the neighbors talked behind their hands.
Yes.
About, and I can't get that phrase out of my head. Then when I listened to the audiobook, which I did twice, I was like, I noticed that I used that phrase 3 times. Now, 3 times in like about 500 pages isn't that bad, but I was like, too many word echoes. But that's the point. I'm a little caffeinated now, but you get the point. You're right. I have to get that right. But I was the reader in a spell. That's how I felt when I wrote it. And that's what I want the reader to feel when they read it.
I was thinking about the characters in the Elena Ferrante novels, especially like watching them on HBO.
Yes.
Those books are those were more character driven than story driven.
Yes. Yes.
And there's the intimacy there that was going on. And I think you've read those books. Have you read those?
Absolutely. I love them. I'm a huge fan of Ferrante.
And I just felt that it's that character study, then the way these people speak to each other, that you don't need a lot of extra words on the page. You just need them to be saying the words right. And if they say the words right, you don't need to be describing the hand gesture, whatever. It's what they're saying. Right.
And the context of the family too. And that it's Elisabetta's story. And, you know, Ferrante is in a line, the most recent, that it extends from Grazia Deledda, who's in the novel, to Elsa Morante. There's a vein of it, really strong Italian women. And I was like, hearken to it. Refer to it. That's who Elisabetta. Part of the reason you choose heroes for characters is because it is revelatory of character. Who you admire says who you are. And so it's a sneaky way. I'm sort of divulging my tricks of the trade. So she isn't even sure she wants to be a novelist, but she loves reading. So anyway, Ferrante is terrific. And I some of the comparisons, reviews have made that comparison. I've been just really honored by it.
Yeah, because I think that I'm looking about even the HBO characters, like when you're walking down the streets and whatever, and you feel the familiarity of what's going on. And it is also, I felt like you were setting that same backdrop up. Like I saw them walking down the street and everything happening behind them. Like you could just feel what was going on back there.
And Rome has that feel. Rome, you know, like Naples, it's a big city, but it has smaller neighborhoods like Philadelphia, like Boston, like New York, like any city. And within those blocks, my daughter lives in New York. I know the people on her block because we all walk the dogs. I see them when I go up. So you got to make it real city life for these real people at this point in time.
Yeah. Was there one character that was easier to write? Was Elisabetta easier for you to write, or was it?
None of, you know, I love my job. I wake up every day and count my blessings. And this book, I can't even believe. I feel like I'm sky high. But I cannot say that it's ever easy. It's not easy. I'm really caffeinated because I was writing before we came on. You just really have to, Wallace Stegner says he concentrates with his whole mind. I feel like you have to do that when you write. And whenever you're really focused very intensely, it's a great feeling. You feel it when you read too, and you're really reading. I'm like a freak now. I actually listen to an audiobook while I read, which I did with my own book, because I think the audiobook's so sensational. I'm like, I'm really having an immersive experience when I write. I hope people are having an immersive experience when they read, but it's not an easy experience. It's intense.
Mhm. And talking about the audiobook, Eduardo Ballerini and I'm trying
A
to remember.
god.
Yes, I mean a god, like
A god,
absolutely a god.
honestly.
And Cassandra Campbell, they do such a
Terrific.
fantastic job.
She's amazing.
And you said, you heard the repeat of those three phrases that, readers, you'll only have to listen and see if you hear them the same way she heard them. But do you feel that you read your book aloud? Do you ever read your book aloud?
I absolutely do. I secretly do. Now you're getting the dirt.
Mhm.
I read everything all the time over and over out loud. I live alone, so it helps. It's probably why I'm divorced twice, although there are many other excellent reasons why I'm divorced twice.
But the dogs are now reciting. I want you
The
to know
dogs are all over it, man. The dogs can perform the audiobook too. And but you have to do that because you have to hear it's. I always think my mind, I think it's like a tumbled stone. You get a stone and it smooths and it smooths and it smooths. And the more it smooths, the more simple the sentence looks, which can be deceptive. You're like, well, that's kind of simple. Well, not really, because it's very hard to write you can write a complicated sentence. There's a great quote by Lincoln. He says something like, if you give him 40 hours, if you give him 20 hours, he'll write a 9-page brief. And if you give him 10, he'll write it half the size. The idea being, the more you reduce it, like any kind of a roux or a distillation, or really get it down to its essence, you're going to really, really, really have sentences that are doing triple duty for you. I always think of Hemingway. He says, write drunk, edit sober. That, I don't do that literally, but when I edit, I go, okay, now you have a book. Now you have to make it awesome. So just really look at every sentence. And that was from Roth, because Roth taught us every sentence has to justify itself. And actually, I look at every sentence, whether I'm saying it out loud or writing it, and go, justify yourself, because the book is better without the sentence if it doesn't have a purpose for being.
And if it's not moving the story, or if it's not describing something that it's not a clue for later, because sometimes there are little clues that are planted for later. And it doesn't matter that they're not fleshed out there. Sometimes people flesh them out too much here.
Right.
You don't need it.
That's a key mistake. I don't like to make that, because that's my secret. I don't like books that are overwritten.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people, especially if you're a little like me and you have the time, or you're trying to write a book that someone can't put down, which is really, for me, eternal. I was like, girl, you got to write historical fiction that pays the thriller. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of books that are big and thick, and I get engrossed in. I love that. So this is a manageable length. I think it's a very normal length. But my point is this: there are people who will read 300 pages at a stretch, or maybe more. And you don't need to tell them the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm.
They are smart and they remember. So that's a big error. So I go with that. I'm like, you know what you told them that 20 pages ago? They got it. They got it. Take it out. So you can never repeat yourself. I do when I'm in person, like I never shut up, but I don't repeat myself in print.
In the books. Well, it was interesting. When I was reading this manuscript, it was back in July. There were a lot of other things I was reading in between. So the book was around the house. There were pages, like page 100 was over here, then 125.
I'm honored by that, Carol. I really am.
And it was like, then there was some on my nightstand, then there was some next to the bathtub, then there was some like in this office here. And it was so funny because later on I said, I've got to put the whole thing back together. And I was literally going, but here was really interesting is I never lost the continuity of the story.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was huge because I was reading not in right order. I wasn't able to do that at that point. But by the same token, I wanted to get back to the characters. I wanted to get back to what happened. And that to me is it's not the book that you just sit down and read in a day. It's the book that you sit and you come back to and you're like, I like those characters. And even now we're talking 9 months later, I can still see the characters. I can remember making the pasta. I can remember little tiny scenes, So thrillers usually take place over a much shorter time period, like 24 hours. Now, like a week. Everything happens in a week. These people have
right. I like move along.
And it's all over everybody. And it's like, wow, that was 3 days. Woof. Was it a challenge to write bigger and broader? Was it like, wait a second, I'm going to write this over 20 years. How am I, like, did you map? No cards on the wall.
Way too spontaneous a gal for that. I like to rock and roll, which is really dumb, but I can't do it any other way. I've never done anything any other way. So I just go, well, what would logically happen next? And I don't have an outline. So I just say to myself dumb things like, don't worry, fear not, be not afraid. I say weird things. You'll get it down. Just because a lot of times I'm telling myself the story. Mm-hmm. So the answer is in the edit. I'll have a lot of 3 different steps. And then that will be 3 chapters that will need to come out. That's why, in a way, if people are listening to this and writing, and I really encourage them, they can, and any way you do it is the right way, but the way I do it, which is probably the least efficient, is that you're going to tell yourself the story and then take out what you don't need. What the hint that follows from that is don't edit until you're done at the end, because you're going to massage a chapter and make it great, and it's not going to survive. So when I started to wrote this, it was a 1,000-page manuscript. I think you got the normal size one.
I got the normal size one, but you
right,
did.
Right, but I went crazy. I was like, but I, this is a tribute to my wonderful editor, Mark Tavani at Putnam. He's so great. And, I'll tell you this story briefly. Like, I handed him the 1,000-page manuscript, which I've never done before in my life. But I'm like, hey, this is a big ass story. This is love and death and war and peace and love and hate and the Holocaust. And there were real victims that I was very mindful. I made a research trip back to Rome on the 75th anniversary of the event that is very central to this novel. And I met descendants, and you can't even talk about that. So you are very aware when you're writing it that you have an obligation to get it right and to have everything right. Now I forget
Mark gets 1,000 pages.
All right, so Mark gets 1,000 pages. And he calls me up. This is like editors. It's wonderful if you have a great editor, and I have one. And he called me at night, which I'm just telling people does not happen in the world. And it's like 9:30. I'm like scratching my ass, frankly. And he's like, I love this book. He says a lot of nice things, but it needs to begin on page 371. And I was like, I was like, what? And then, but then I thought a minute, and it's like, I was like, oh my God, he's absolutely right. And that night, and he was, and that night I went upstairs. I was up till 3 a.m. in a frenzy, because I also love to turn it around fast. I'm just big on that. I like getting notes if it's someone I really trust, and I really trust his judgment. And I was like, watch this. We are going to just tear this whole thing up. And so then I did what Roth did. I laid all the chapters out on the floor. I don't even have the floor space for this. And I go, you live, you don't, what do you justify yourself? And then feather what was taken out, see what makes it back in. I realized it was like Marie Kondo when she came on and she says, take everything out of the room, then put back what you need. I was like, damn, I think we Marie Kondo'd Eternal, and I'm fine with that. And it was a great edit, and he was right. And when I read the book now and listen to the book now, I go, oh, boom.
Right.
It just worked.
Yeah. And the other stuff's not missing. No,
what needed to survive, because I'm stubborn that way. Yeah. And I think it's very full. It made a world that you want to get lost in.
Yeah. And I could pull some of your other books off the shelves, and this is longer, but it also being longer gave you more latitude of what to do, because it's not going to happen in 5 days. I mean, it's not.
I mean, everything's different. That's what I learned. I mean, I've been writing, memoir, short humor every week. It's up on my website. People should subscribe to my newsletter. They'll get it for free. And all reading feeds reading, and writing, and all writing feeds writing. So in writing those short pieces that are like 800 words, I kind of learned to get to the point. You would not know that by this conversation on my part. So I really feel like everything is, now I have a very good appreciation for, well, you can tell a story in a single point of view and no other characters, and that will of necessity be faster. And sometimes you want a book that's really fast. Sometimes you want a book that moves, but is engrossing. And sometimes you just want to laugh. Right now, I think I'm doing all those 3 things. And it's a very nice feeling and a very blessed feeling at your life to be at this stage of my life, have written 33 novels and 8 memoirs that are funny, and kind of go, what am I contributing? What this story was really that, because when I learned about this, what really happened, I said, well, I used to be a lawyer, I don't have anyone to sue. You can't punish these people within the confines of the law. The victims are gone, the perpetrators are gone, but I can tell the story. Oh, I can do that. And I'm going to try to do that as best, and just sweat blood to do that. And that's what I did.
And I'd never heard about the Jewish quarter in Rome. I only equated the city with Catholicism. I'm Roman
Right.
Catholic, I'm Italian, and your Italian publisher was actually the first person who took you to this area and is showing you this. So tell us about that, because I feel like I learned a lot about the Jewish population in Italy that I knew bupkis about,
And I didn't either. I mean, my background is Catholic as well. And they were like, let's go to the Jewish Quarter. These fried artichokes are amazing. And then I'm looking around and I had noticed we ate in Sandro's Piazza. And I was going, what is good? And I just started to walk around. And that trip, they give you a little free time because you're touring in Italy. So the next day, and I'm looking around going, this is really hallowed ground. Like this is not, I did, and how did I not know this?
Mhm.
And I must tell you, I mean, Carol, if you're a writer and you discover something, it happens in the thrillers too. I'm always like, oh my God, readers like to learn things. I like to learn things and I like to go down those wormholes. And so I was like, somebody's going to write this story and it's not going to be you, Lisa. Like, you're the one, man. This is law, justice, and Italians. And that's your intersection. That's your street, girl. Don't be afraid. And I was afraid. Then I finally said, you better do it. You're ready now. And
But
now
you could have written it 20 years ago. You couldn't have, I don't think so.
I don't think so. And but there's part of me that goes, I want to encourage people to write, maybe a little before they're ready. Because as they say, lean in, Sheryl Sandberg in her Lean In, women, we hold ourselves back a little bit. We're a little afraid of risk. We sometimes, my generation more than the younger generation, but so we say we're not ready, not that we're scared. Someday we'll be ready, just not yet. I think I honestly wasn't ready, but now I'm ready. Now I'm out of my crate, man. Now they've created a monster because I really love telling these stories and I'm going to do more.
Well, just think about it. 20 years ago, more of these people would have been alive to be telling their story. So now you're telling their story and you're taking what they're saying. Whereas, let's say my grandmother would make things up, like they would make things up. And this way they're not making things up. You're making the things up. They're not having to justify what they did. You're just telling their story because people feel badly about things that they did that were wrong, or people hide the truth. I mean, I always joke that Italians are very good at hiding. Like, this is like, oh, that never happened. Like, it did happen. How can you say that didn't happen? It did happen. True. And people aren't proud of it. So they put it away. They put it someplace.
Right. Well, there's Holocaust deniers even now. And when I went on the research trip and we were looking at the transit camp at Fossili outside of Carpi near Modena, which is actually in this book, it's not very well visited. It's only open one day a week. The cab driver said, I was there with my best friend, Laura, and the cab driver said, this is a dark mark on our history. Nobody's racing to look at this. And I must tell you that when I was doing the research, I consulted a great historian, Stan Pugliese, and also another one. And I was very bothered because essentially when you learn about it, you realize it's a war crime. And I was like, why was this war crime? Why was there no Nuremberg is what I said to this one historian who I won't name. And he said, nobody wanted another Nuremberg. And I thought, I did. I still do. That's injustice allowed to go unpunished. And that shouldn't be. So I do think there's an aspect of let's not look at this. But the truth is, it's history. It enlightens the present. Marco is a good example of why people fall for fascism. He feels, we're not giving away his secret. He has, modern readers will know he's dyslexic, but you didn't know that then. So it was so interesting to figure out what was it like to be dyslexic in 1930s Rome. And he feels dumb and it affects his self-esteem and it's something he keeps to himself, and his girlfriend loves to read and his best friend's a genius. And when fascism comes along and says, you're not dumb, you're smart just because you live in Rome. You have Roman blood and that is special and you are a son of Lazio. You see how he cleaves to that message and it swells him with pride. And so the whole thing is sort of the rise and fall of fascism. You understand how these people fell into it and also what happens when they realize they were wrong. And that's a very human story. You can't pretend that didn't happen and you shouldn't.
No. And I think that it's also, you shot these videos when you were there, you shot these vignettes that you used on Facebook very effectively before the book came out. They're now on your website.
Right, 20 of them.
It was, yes, there were tons. And but the thing was important for you to bring the readers there so that if you're never going to go to Italy, this is what this looks like. This is what this street looked like. This is how far it was from this to this. So people, the map that's in the book, the map that's in the front of the book. Okay?
Right.
Like,
well, I can show you the source for the map because, you know, doing your homework, I got this, looked online on Etsy, actually. In 1925, it was the map of Rome, because I want to see exactly what it looked like. And then I was like, well, my beloved publisher put it on the inside. I asked them, I said, listen, can we put this? And the stuff on the website, I think, is a wonderful companion because you can see the videos that I filmed there, just because I was so in love with this subject and I thought it was so important. I was like, this is important. And it's not the book per se, but it's the research. There's also on the website, which I've never done before. I don't know if any author's done it before, actually, an interactive map where we've mapped the sites in the book and you can click on it and go there, see the photos I took and the videos. And it's great for book clubs and it's great for people who are not in book clubs who just want to visualize it and learn more. I think we all have that instinct now, learn more. I find if I'm watching TV and something comes on, I go, oh, did that really happen? Or how did that happen? And you're on your phone and you're looking and gee, I've seen that actor. Wasn't he on, you know, something before? I do it with my daughter all the time. So I wanted to satisfy that urge because I think that people who read are really smart and only get smarter by reading, and they want to soak it up. And that's what I wanted to give them.
Yeah. And I felt like fascism didn't start as anti-Semitic movement.
No, not at all.
And it made it darker. I mean, it just made everything like darker when you sit there and think about this. And they were actually stripped of their citizenship. Right. So you referenced that some Jews were living in Vatican City, which I didn't know, being hidden.
I didn't know that
in Vatican
either.
City.
There was an amazing, because there are some true stories of heroism in this book that I found. And it's really like there's a guy named Monsignor O'Flaherty, who was a super tall, great golfer who basically was called the Scarlet Pimpernel of the Vatican because he put on disguises trying to save Jews all around Rome, and he brought them in the Vatican. I learned that the Vatican had like 700 apartments that went unused. So Jews were actually hidden in the Vatican. He also hid them around in apartments in Rome under assumed names. There's also an incredible thing, which I don't want to give away, but just a ruse that a Gentile doctor at a Catholic hospital thought of to save the Jewish patients from the Nazis when they occupied. So I just was like, there were so many true stories. And at the end of the novel, because I always sort of wish that, you know, like I watched The Crown, I was like, how much of that is true and what isn't? I was like, Lisa, I don't know if this is even kosher, but you're going to put in the back of the book, this is what's true. This Monsignor existed. Elizabeth is fiction. This isn't with fiction. Try to explain it, break it down, because I think by the end it was pretty, if I can say so, I think it was sort of seamlessly intertwined. And I wanted the reader to understand, just so that all of those true life people get their due.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that.
I have to say, when I found out that Prince Philip died, I felt like I knew him from The Crown.
Right. And I'm right.
Oh my gosh, that guy.
Like, I know him. I don't know. Yeah.
I knew so much about him. Oh my gosh.
I love the stuff is so great. It's just
I knew what Hollywood showed me.
Historical fiction is interesting and history is interesting. It just can't be the way that I learned it, which was a little bit dry and what's 1842 and whatever. It has to be alive and relevant, and it can be.
Well, we learned battles. Who won the battle? Where was the battle fought? What year was the battle? That's how you got an A.
An outline A, B, C. Yeah.
And if you didn't, but why the battle was fought really didn't matter. It was just the year it was fought, the this, that, and that's how you got the A. And if you
and even with respect to fascism, we sort of learned Mussolini succeeded because he made the trains run on time. And the more I read, and I read a lot, it was clear that that was not true. Like, and I thought about it, just you use your intuition. Infrastructure, you know, okay, potholes are one thing, but the way that the country went for him, that became cult-like, it's much more than that. It was an emotional connection that didn't have to do with a timetable on a train. And I think I understood that, and I think I explained it. I'm not a historian, but I get to say, and that's what I think.
Well, there was this moment when, and I'll read this, Chief Rabbi Zoli suggested the president of the Italian Jewish communities, Dante Almansi, that he wants to destroy the community's list of Jews living in Rome. He sees the future. These are very powerful moments about how things could have been different. And when we look at history, we have to see the possibility that it could have gone another way. We
Right.
could have just hid all these people, and
Right.
then the story would have been completely different.
Right. And those people would be alive and
Yeah.
their descendants. And that's a true thing. What I really, the task, and I wanted to do it, and I was very happy that my editor let me, which was the thing with, a lot of Holocaust stories where they sort of sell, like you could just skip ahead to what the bad thing, and then it's over. I wanted to show what was really true in Italy, and I think was unique to Italy, that the fascists, through these laws, kind of was death by 1,000 cuts. This, then this, then this. And it explains why the Italian Jews stayed. It also explains why Jews from all over Europe fled to Italy, thinking they would be safe, partly because of the Vatican, but partly, as you say, interestingly, I think it's fascinating that I was surprised to learn that Rome is the seat of the longest continuously existing Jewish community in Western civilization, right across the river from the Vatican. That doesn't get more fascinating. And so I wanted to show the little things, like, as you say, rabbis only going, we should hide this, we should do this. And then what the Italians do, the fascists do, then what the Nazis do. And boom, boom, boom. And it becomes a ratcheting up of really legalized horror. The question is, what happens when the laws themselves are unjust? The answer is eternal.
Yeah. And what happens is we have crime here, just like in your other books, but the crime here impacted a much larger group of people. It wasn't just so-and-so is going to be killed. It was a much larger group of people was going on, and justice was a completely different thing, because what was just, what was right. And then everybody's trying to protect themselves.
Exactly. And the question also, the other thing that happens is not just perpetrated against the Jews, there's an anti-fascist in this book. We won't give anything away, but if you didn't agree with fascism, in the beginning, it was the carrot. You're great, you're Italian, we're wonderful. Then it starts to be the stick. If you don't, all the propaganda comes on, or the Mussolini makes radio super cheap just so you can listen to his speeches. They control all of those airwaves. Then they start to beat you up and silence you if you disagree. So that's a crime too. It is a regime that rises on assault and murder and terrorizes people. So you have to look at that unflinching. And it's important too. So you're right, the crime is rampant. It's throughout. It's hard to say who's the bad guys and who's the good guys.
It's hard to say. And then at one point, the character of Nona says, we must lift our gaze from our own plates. A community is comprised of people, all its people. And you play that through for people to watch what's going on. It's not just good and evil. There's a lot in between. And I felt like a lot of times you were seeing this book through the eyes of a lawyer. Like, okay, there's right, there's wrong, but there's the middle. And are people going to see themselves as right or wrong or the middle? What are they going to do? How are they going to see?
That's so fascinating. Yeah. Thank you.
Pick your raised gaze up from your plate. And I think we can say that a lot about what's going on now in the world too. It's like, stop looking right there. Let's just figure out what's going on.
Yes. I mean, and Massimo, who's a lawyer, I think he's a good example. He's a tax lawyer. He's a little bit rigid, and a little bit also, he has a little bit, I love him as a character because he has faith in the law. So do I still. I loved being a lawyer. I was a adjunct law professor. I believe that it's a really noble profession. I hate when people corrupt it. I hate when lawyers corrupt it. So it's an ideal that he still believes in. So it's a little bit slow. It's hard for him. And so I wanted all of these different views of law and justice. What is justice is a question you do not need a law degree to answer. Just right or wrong, moral or immoral, ethical or unethical. These are all really nuanced questions that I wanted to raise them in this book.
Yeah, and they're there. And then, but then we've also got the prologue at the beginning that teases what's to come. And you're reading this prologue, and I've taken to recently doing something, I can't believe this, after all these years of reading and 25 years of running Bookreporter, I've gone back and read the prologue at the end, because a lot of times at the beginning, it's like, okay, yeah, whatever you say. Okay, Lisa, I got it.
Right, you guys right.
It's like, okay,
Right overhead. Yeah.
this is set up to get me keep reading. And then we go to something else. And I want to go back and I want to start telling people, read the prologue at the end and just see, because it was there for a reason. It was there as like your little carrot at the beginning. Was that always there, or did you move that in? Was that something that happened after the 345 pages got cut?
No, that was not there in the beginning. And it really was something that just kind of arose talking with my editor and thinking, well, this is a really good way to frame this. But also I want the, all of this stuff we're talking about, these darker points and these historical points, I want the focus to be on Elisabetta and love. So she is the story. And I wanted, it always has to be personal. It always has to come down to a character and a character wanting something and who she is. And so she finds her voice and she finds her love, and it's a very unique situation. So in a way, it was very natural and organic. It doesn't, and I was, and you know, when I got to the end, because I forget about the prologue a little, and I was like, oh, wow, this actually, that's when you go, there is a God, because it actually kind of worked. And you go from, because whenever you're writing something or reading, you want to go from point A to point B, and you hope that it's an ascension. You hope that you are like, whoa, what level did we get to? I didn't know we were going there. I guess we're there.
We're there. We're in that part of the story now. Yeah.
You're going to name a book Eternal. You got to get very epic in proportion. And I hope I did. I mean, I really hope I did.
Was Eternal always the name of the book? Was that always the title?
And I went back and forth with a lot of titles, but when I remember driving down the turnpike, you know, you get ideas when you just don't look, you look away. Like my shower is where I think, I don't shower for a couple of days. I'm like, I can't think. So it's like the pandemic's really hurt my productivity. But I just remember thinking Eternal, like that's, because it's really a lot about time and time conflating, and how the families and the generations are kind of time visible, and these layers and the layers of architecture. It's all like some crazy of a piece. And I thought that's the title. I also
thought the eternal flame. I was thinking of eternal flame, and the flame keeps burning. You know?
Yeah, that's right. Eternal flame. Rome is the eternal city, and that love is eternal. That love really does conquer all things. Love is eternal. My mother has passed. This is the time of year. I feel so much love for her this time of year. Is she gone? Not really. She's eternal.
Yeah. Well, let's get into your pasta making skills, because after reading this, I said to my husband, we have to make pasta. And every time I come up with these things sometimes, and he's like, what? I'm like,
no, right. I totally get that. I mean, I avoid Lambrusco just because of this book all the time now.
Like, it's like, okay, what are you going to do? So the other day I said, I'm going to go make pasta downstairs. And he's looking like, and I take the recipe literally out of the, like, you know, the back of the pasta container, and I'm looking something up online. I'm making it. I'm like, so then I said, we're going to have pasta for dinner tonight. So where's the pasta maker? Because now I need him, because he's an engineer and he has to put the thing together, because I don't know how to do that. Right.
Cranking it, yeah.
And then he says to me, now, doesn't it have to dry? And I go, no, I have the one that doesn't have to dry. We're supposed to cook it immediately or put it in the refrigerator. And it just becomes this whole process.
Yeah.
But there were parts of the book where this was this little moment of making these tiny, perfect pieces of pasta that were the most important thing that day. And I think that it sort of honed back of, the world is so big, but then there's this moment of making the pasta together. And you used to do that with your mom on Sundays, right?
I did. Mostly I watched her, because she was the professoressa. You know, she'd be like, she always, I used all the details, every single detail I used. How the flour would cake on her hands, and how she would shoot the gnocchis back, like backhand. She was an expert. And our website has her ravioli recipe for book club, so they can knock themselves out. She made the best ravs. It was incredible. But truly, I also wanted to, it's like the same thing again. It's like the bra. You got to like reduce it to the personal level. Women cook, and so do men, but this is a way back time. So there aren't a lot of men cooking.
No, they weren't a lot of men.
Right. She's a home cook, and she's known as self-taught. And also Elisabetta needs a mom. You know, her family, the families are all different in this book, and her family is splintered, and she is hurting from that. Although she doesn't realize it. I admire her, because I think she does what women do. She just puts one foot in the other, and, you know, she survives. And they all survive. At some point, I think she says, I didn't realize this line till it came out, but I was like, she feels lower class than her friends and a lot of people. But at the end of the war, she says there's only one class, and the class is survivors. and that was resonant for me with Holocaust survivors too. That relationship and those pasta scenes are only nominally and superficially about pasta, right? They're also about that connection and that granular connection. So much of it, when she leaves the table, she can see the flour. I'm on a table now I have flour in the
grooves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was those moments though, you look there and you look back, it's like looking at a table, and we have a kitchen table here that I keep saying we should replace, but it's really got every mark from the kids when they were growing up.
Right.
And it's fabulous Southwestern table. I could never replace the table. And people come over and they go, I really like that table. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't you see that crack? Right. I was like, okay, people come over, throw a tablecloth over it. I don't really care, but it's
a kitchen table. I'm on the kitchen table. That was the kitchen table at my house. With my mom, at that point I was adult. My daughter was there. My mom would come over. We would make gnocchis on this table. So there's something about a table.
Yeah. Something about that. Something about that.
Yeah. Something about that.
Had you read a lot of historical fiction before you wrote this? I knew you read a lot of thrillers because I've seen your bookshelves. I mean, right. So was there a lot of, did you sit there and go, I'm going to study the craft, or did you just say, I know I'm going to do this book?
No, I didn't study the craft. I've always loved historical fiction. And I just go by what's a good, because my life is in books and I live alone and I'm celibate. So I read a lot. And I also love audiobooks. I listen a lot. My hair is so wacky today. And I tried to wash it for you, Carol. Now it's fly away. But, so I just go, what's getting well reviewed? What are people saying on Goodreads? What are people saying online? And boom, I'll get that book. So I've been fans of people like Lisa C. and Lisa Wingate and Paula McLean and Christina Baker Klein and Pam Jenoff. And I can just name them because I've been reading them for so long. And when I wrote Eternal, I mean, I just want to say a big shout out to them because I wrote them. And I was like, you know what? I always wanted to write historical fiction. I give them the whole story. Would you mind reading the book? And if you like it, commenting. And they were all like, I love it. And they all said nice things. They were just completely welcoming as a community of women. And I am trying to pay that back 1,000-fold because it's really a nice thing. And I think we women really can help each other so much just in our friendship. And I think everybody knows that when you have an author you admire, they turn out to be nice. There's so many Jodi Picoult. I mean, I can, just name so many off the top of my head. They're just really generous minded authors.
Well, one thing is, we've been so virtual this past year, but one thing that's been able to happen is you might not have been able to do an event with a Paul McLean. You might not have been able to do an event with Martha Hall Kelly. You might not have been able to do this because you would have been writing on this deadline and you wouldn't go to that city where they were going to be, and they're not going to come to Philly necessarily on tour. No. Whereas now I think that's been really interesting is the combos of who you see in conversation that you never would have had before.
And we should say that for people who are watching what we're talking about. It's like, if you're an author, you go on a tour, you stand in the bookstore. I love to tour because I'm lonely. So I get fun. I meet my readers, we're going to hug it out. But now it's sad you can't do that. So now what they're doing is authors are interviewing other authors. When I started to get these requests, I'm like, wait, what? You want to read your book and interview you like that? That's, it was a little bit like, am I qualified? But then I was all excited because I would have read the book anyway, because it's all people I love. And so David Baldacci asked me to do it, and Janet Ivana, and I'd read them. So now Paula McLean. So then I asked her, Martha O'Kelly, we're asking each other. It's kind of fun and great. I feel like, and I also feel like I hope readers are happy because you get these conversations turn into, for the most part, how do you write? Now, how do you write? What matters to you? Well, here's what matters to me. And I've learned from it. I think it ends up being a really great conversation. I mean, not everybody is as thoughtful or as schooled or as savvy as you, Carol. So I can have that conversation with you. But generally, if you're in a bookstore, you're going to stand up alone and give your spiel. No one is there's no conversation with. So this is sort of interesting. And
it's usually
cool.
The question from the audience is, where do you get your ideas from? The question from the audience is something, and it's not that you don't want to talk to the audience.
No, I love talking. I'll tell that to the class I'm home, but it's not the same thing.
But it's also a lot of times people are coming to see you who have not read the book yet. They're coming because you're on tour to get them to buy the book. So no conversation about the book itself, except
Right.
you're telling your spiel. And I personally have found this past year to be really interesting. A couple of times a week, I'm watching author interviews.
Yeah.
I'm watching people in between doing other things. I'll pull up a Facebook interview that somebody did. I'll keep score. We actually have been putting in our Book Reporter newsletter, like, this is what's happening this week of the ones we think people would be interested in going to see. So
I
that
saw that.
people
That's great. I think that's
go.
great.
No.
Yeah.
And
No.
then when you have if you want to have a book discussion and the author's not going to be there, you can pull up the author interview and share it with your whole group in
Right.
advance to enhance your conversation. So there's so many bad things that have happened in the last year, but by the same token, I feel like we've moved as a business in a different direction.
Well, and I never, for example, you mentioned the videos. I had these 20 research videos. I was like, you should just tell people about them. So now every Tuesday night I'm on Facebook. Now I'm going to take questions tomorrow night. I'll talk about I don't want to give spoilers, but I've never just throw myself on in some medium and go, hey, let's talk about the book. But I can communicate with readers that way. I want to encourage them to get the book. Let's be real about that. I'm not shy about that. And if they liked it, I want them to post about it and rave about it, because I really love this book and I'm really proud of it. So it's kind of empowering for authors and for readers, because they're going to get on. They're going to ask me a question. I would have loved to have been able to. Philip Roth, do you know, why did you make the mother like this? He's not good. That never happened. So we didn't even do it in class. So I think I agree with you. Look, I say it's turning lemons into limoncello. That's what we're doing,
Exactly. And you know what? I think that it's something that we're not going to want to shy away from going forward. I think the author tour is going to be more hybrid as goes on, because you're going to want to have this experience, especially since you can't go to every book club. You can't go to every single place. But if you can give the experience of, this is why I wrote this. I mean, my one other question is, was this always the cover? Because it's a gorgeous cover. Did you play around with the cover?
Honestly, I think it's like the first, I can't remember the cover before. I just remember when this came out, I'm emotional. Tears came to my eyes. That's how I know something works. I was like, oh, wow. I thought that captures the wistfulness. It captures, she's a regular woman. She's not like some young foxy chick. It captures so much of Rome. It captures the gold. It has the paper. It's to die for. I'm so lucky.
It's funny. I got a note from one of our readers last week. She's, why do all the people have the backs to the person on the cover's back? And I said, because they don't want you to identify with the person, because you might not like the way she looks. Like, you don't need to see her face. You just need to see it's a woman on the cover.
And I try to explain that too, because people get like, kind of like, they don't get it. And I just, listen, I don't want them to show her face. I described all of these characters. I know what they look like. So do you. And I'm sure our views are not the same. So that's the magic of books. If
I drew her, I may not draw her the same way you did. I may not do this. And it doesn't matter. It's my interpretation. That's the reason it's a book. It's not a movie. It's not a movie that they're presenting it to me.
It engages your imagination. That's my job. And that's what I love as a reader. Engage me.
So are you going to write more historical fiction?
Yes. Absolutely. I'm so excited about the idea for the next one.
Oh, good. And what's next? Is next a standalone, a series?
A standalone domestic thriller. And then at some point I'm going to try to squeeze in a Rosato and D'Annunzio, because I miss those girls.
Because you have so much free time.
I think when you open up, you're open, and then the next historical, I just feel very, very lucky. And listen, thank you to you for doing this. And thank you to Book Reporter. And thank you to my readers. I am so grateful. I hope you'll get a copy of the book. Join a book club. If you're not in a book club, you can do our a cappella book club. We're doing something we never did before. People who get the book, hold it up, and we're going to put you in a virtual book club and have a meeting for you.
Yeah, because I think we just are trying different things. And it's like, wait, we're not in a book club? Doesn't really matter. I wasn't in a book club, though I have had reading group guides for 21 years. I was not in a book club till about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I bet. No, I've never been in one either. And I read the reading guides, and I talk to book clubs. I'm never in one.
No. And discussion questions. Sometimes we use them. A lot of times we don't. A lot of times we just start talking about the book, what else you're reading. The book club is a conduit to something else as well. But mostly, but we've seen book clubs saying they're going to read Returnal. Like, we've seen this.
Good. I hope so.
Considering
we're starting to get some pictures in, which is great.
Yeah, March 23rd, And we're now at what, April? I don't even know what day of the week it is. I think it's
I don't
April
either.
10th or something. It's April something. And people are already saying that it's not like we have these big builds on the book anymore. It's like, I'm going to read this now. This is what our group is going to read next month.
Well, I
So,
hope so, because we're going to do a contest and I'll go visit 25 book club houses virtually.
virtually.
But I'm just excited and very, very, very grateful. Carol,
Yeah.
really, thank you.
It is so great to see you. I'm so glad we got to talk about this and really, get in depth with our readers. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I love you.
I love you too. And to our readers, I look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To. Thanks so much, everybody.